Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's waiting coverage of the International Remote Viewing Association's 25th anniversary cruise here aboard the Mariner of the Seas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by remote viewer Luciano Arruda from Brazil. Welcome to the show.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've met just a couple days ago, and it's been a great conference. There have been some fantastic presentations. Right. You're going to be presenting. It's great to have so many international remote viewers here. It was awesome to talk with Carl a little bit ago, and one of the interesting things we were talking about is the idea of building communities and networks of remote viewers across the globe because of the importance of realizing the way that even our social morals and mores and the way that we're brought up, our politics, the way that those things can filter a session.
Exactly, yes.
You know? So let's get into a little bit of how did you get into the world of remote viewing to begin with?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because, I've kind of been working with intuition for a good while and learned how to meditate about 25 years ago.
Okay.
And so I spent a lot of time looking inward and sort of becoming aware that, I have some level of sensitivity that,
Okay.
Would lead to something that would, be in connection with remote viewing. So maybe 3 years ago, I joined the IRVA conference in Menlo Park.
Okay.
And I attended the whole meeting. And at the end, Deborah Katz, the president, she had a slide at the end that said, this is what's coming next. And we're looking for someone who can maybe help us with globalization.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to expand our footprint worldwide and kind of put some initial blocks in place. And I thought, well, I'm really into remote viewing. I'm kind of a beginner intermediary remote viewer. But I do globalization. I work with globalization for a living.
Yeah.
I've spent the last 30 years doing that.
Yeah, professionally, that's what you do.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, maybe I can help with some of the fundamental like operations, infrastructure, and some of the scalability elements that we need to have in place. Because, like you said, there's a lot of people in the world.
A lot.
Right. And then when you start to expand your community worldwide, you need that scalable approach because, maybe you can handle 5 emails a day. But you don't, if you get 2,000 emails a day, you're not going to handle.
That's right.
So there has to be a structure of delegation. There has to be kind of a community leaders, and there should be like a path for doubling every couple of years, something like that.
Oh yeah.
So
a metric
like
growth plan, something like that. Now, even whenever you're talking about the infrastructure of once again building networks of people across the globe and what that means, and even how we communicate.
Exactly.
Differs across even the capabilities of somebody in Nigeria communicating as opposed to somebody in Brazil or in Texas. The technical capabilities of what they have is even different.
But that's the beauty of it. Because, it brings in all these different flavors into the mix. And then that basically amplifies the ways that we interpret things. Yeah. And, I think you just brought in a very important point, which is language. Yeah. We do have cultural differences. We also speak, in different ways. And, so you have to find a way to create open communication channels that are inclusive. Yeah. But at the same time, IRVA being a nonprofit, and one of my mandates is to make sure that we preserve the brand, we preserve the identity. Yeah. And and that helps us to gain trust. Basically, it's very important to do that. So there's a process for that.
Well, absolutely, because you've got to present something from a point of stability. You've got to show that despite whether you're in Africa or Asia or Brazil, that IRVA has a unified cause, that there is a unified end goal to everything. And that's now, were you, one of the questions I typically ask, because I take classes from Lynn Buchanan, and his whole concept is you don't have to be clairvoyant or psychic to be a remote viewer. Now, were you an intuitive or psychic or anything like that before you came to the world of remote viewing?
Yeah. So I do have some training in clairvoyance. Okay. So I attended classes at a place called the Berkeley Psychic Institute for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So I went to their clairvoyant program, to their teachers program, and many other classes they had, and basically develop a practice of what we call like running energy.
Okay.
That basically it kind of clears your channels. I kind of see myself, as a crystal.
Okay.
And my job is to make sure my crystal is clean. And so I meditate as often as I can. And then by keeping the crystal clean, I can tap into my, let's just put it this way, my life force energy.
Yeah.
And I can kind of practice radiating it in the highest frequency I can.
Yeah.
So I do have, past experiences with clairvoyance, and, I can kind of go into that a little more if you want.
Well, let's explore that a little bit more, because I love talking with people about clairvoyant experience, but also about how that is interpreted to the average person. Because it's very interesting synesthetically how that's interpreted. Because even the idea of it's strange when you start remote viewing and you kind of start that process of, the way I explain it, as opposed to meditation, where you want to silence the monkey mind. This is where you want to give the monkey a typewriter. You want the monkey to kind of just flow free and write.
Yeah.
And that can be strange. It can be really weird to write down, like, I smell metal, things like that. So how do you prepare that synesthetic process between clairvoyance and remote viewing?
Remote viewing. Well, so there's a real difference in the approach, I think. But like, just stepping back, most of the time, if I'm kind of looking at anything, and I'm going to give you an example. Maybe you wake up every day and you say, I'm going to have the best day of my life. I'm going to just make sure that I'm happy.
That's right.
And I'm just going to go on with my day. And then you have to make a decision at some point in time. Should I do this or should I do that? So intuitively, you may feel like, I don't want to do this. I want to do that. I think it's going to be better. So I think that both on the psychic and the RV level, you have to awaken curiosity, right? So remote viewing is about data collection, and psychic is maybe about understanding.
Okay.
For me, the way I see it.
All right.
So on the data collection side, why don't I feel good about doing this? Is there something about this activity that maybe I have resistance, or is there an element to this choice today that's going to make me grow, evolve spiritually? Or is there something negative that I'm trying to avoid, and I probably should do that? So the curiosity element, I think, is very important, because when we're looking at things, we're constantly collecting data.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, if you're not curious, you're basically just going with the first layer, and you make a decision. And we're making decisions all the time. Every day we make decisions about things the whole month. So that's the first thing, is curiosity is extremely important on both sides. But I think that on a psychic level, I have a little bit more of the know. I know why, or I can ask questions to my consciousness, and the answers, my unconscious will come. Where the RV, you're kind of really it's a more methodical process, and so I think it's safer. So I like RV because there's a black and white protocol. It's a proven approach. Yeah. And if you're kind of feeling a little bit uncertain, or you kind of feel like things are getting confusing, you can always fall back into the RV. Yeah. It's very good.
Yeah, and it's also okay if it's confusing.
Yes. Part of it.
That's part of it, and that's also what further probing of the target is for, things like that. Exactly. That's why you go back and that's the example that I keep giving in all these interviews, is that's why I like my monitor. I understand why a lot of people, especially people with clairvoyant experience, don't use a monitor, don't utilize a monitor. But for me, that's where the monitor is the most important, because they're the ones that are going to be like, hey, wait a minute, you said this a while ago. Let's go back and explore that.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's go back and get curious about that saltwater smell that you had. Things like that.
On a psychic level, when you're kind of doing clairvoyant readings, there's also the concept of a monitor, or someone who's looking and watching energy and saying, like, okay, let's kind of give it a little break and let's bring everybody back.
Well, even in the concept of having a spirit guide, that's there helping you, things like that.
You can say that too. But and I mean, on both sides of the coin, I think that for me, it really comes down to like learning more about myself.
Okay.
So the monitor helps me to understand, why am I seeing these things, and what do they mean to me? What is my filter, right? And how am I interpreting things?
Yeah.
because of something that happened in my history.
And
so, so
yeah, and even referring back to being a crystal and clairvoyance, that I think is another part that I really love of the actual CRV process, the controlled remote viewing, is that beginning self-check where you clear the crystal. And it's like, okay, what's been distracting me? What I got in a fight with my wife 2 days ago and we haven't made up. Things like that that may filter the information that's coming through, may color or provide the AOL, the analytic overlay that we try to avoid so much.
Yeah, it could be instrumental, to explore AOLs.
So, with both sides in your life, the clairvoyant and remote viewing, do you ever find that the two conflict with each other? Do you ever find that one gets in the way of the other during a session either way?
Yeah, because on the clairvoyant side, you kind of tend to be, maybe it's a bad word, but lazy, right? Because the information comes to your awareness all at once and fairly quickly. You may have telepathic experiences, you may have like visualizations, sound, like you said, taste, metal, or there has a bunch of different things, and they all come in and you just know it. While the remote viewing, it feels more to me like you're peeling layers and you're kind of getting deeper and deeper. So that's an amazing approach too, because you can spend maybe 2 hours on a remote view session, where in a clairvoyant reading, or when you do a clairvoyant view, it's a lot faster for me. So I can appreciate the remote viewing aspect, that you can keep digging deeper and deeper, and maybe after 3 days, I have a very good crystal clear understanding of what I'm looking at. And keep in mind, it's just a number, right?
Sure. No.
But I actually have a very good
And do you find
about it?
Is it the fact, because the Outbounder that we did was maybe session 8 or 9 of remote viewing for me, and one of the last sessions that I did with my monitor was the first session where we had numerous sessions in one session. Where it was like, okay, now we're going to do a session about natural.
That's it.
We're going to go just with the ideogram and natural now. Let's start digging into that. Do you find yourself, do you do the same thing with a clairvoyant session where you have numerous sessions like that and dig deeper and deeper and deeper?
Yes, very much. Yeah, it's it could be seen as, I'm looking at a book and let's turn the page and let's go to the next page. Or you're looking at a layer of energy and then you basically allow yourself to go deeper into the next layer, what's behind it. And then you maybe kind of make an assumption that this is just a filter and there's a level of interpretation going on here. So let's kind of bottle that, put it on the side, and then let's go a little bit further.
Sure. And especially with at least with a lot of mediumship that I know, clairvoyance that I know, part of their meditative process is that point of self-protection. That point of white light, shielding yourself with it, things like that. Have you ever found yourself under any kind of malevolent attack or anything like that during either a clairvoyant session or a remote viewing session?
Yeah. Well, I can say that, coming back to the idea that I'm learning about myself on a spiritual, psychic level, the way I look at it is I have an open contract, or I have an opening in my space that allows something that is perceived to be evil to sort of be aggressive with me. But, I try to flip it around and kind of just look at where and what do I believe that would allow that type of energy to disturb my peace, right?
Sure.
How am I allowing something to attack me or destroy me or whatever? But it's not really destroying me. It's teaching me to become senior to it. So anytime there is some kind of an interruption of viewing, it's actually an opportunity to find out, what do I believe in and why do I allow something like this to interrupt me? And then why is this pushing off my path? And then kind of go back and see, maybe I did have I did give permission for that.
Sure,
so I can grow.
What did I do to give it agency over me in my decision making process?
So I kind of tend to take it more on that level, and less of I'm victimizing.
Less of an attack. situation.
It's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I asked that because I know numerous remote viewers that have done government work, things like that, and they've definitely had the experience of being viewed while they're viewing, things like that. I know numerous clairvoyants that have definitely had things attached to them, despite their protective uses and things like that. And I mean, so it's always something that I ask, like, you as a clairvoyant, and especially even as a remote viewer, what precautions do you recommend somebody take for things like that?
I think the first one is to laugh, is to bring amusement into the picture. You have to be light, and you can't be caught up on that control. And so anything that you're working on and paying too much attention to, that controls you. So the first thing is to lighten up, and bring a little bit of happiness, amusement into the picture, so that you can detach from the emotional kind of aspect and not make it a competition to see who's the boss here. So that's kind of the first thing, is to step back and bring amusement into it. And then the second one is to kind of look at the root cause and maybe try to engage with it and understand. So this is usually works best when I kind of raise the frequency of the communication, and try to bring in a more broad, universal aspect of, like, why are you concerned about me talking to somebody on a spiritual level that could break up your agreement with that person? So this is usually when these attacks happen, is when you start to talk about something that maybe you shouldn't talk about or touch, and then lo and behold, there is some kind of a hand or a grab in your head, and it's just you're having a headache, and you just feel like, I can't see. I'm seeing nothing. You're seeing a punch. And then so it's good to step back and, like, be amused. This is happening, and there's a reason. Why is it happening? Bring yourself up to gold. Talk to the agent that's maybe interacting with you and say, what's the deal? How can I help you? Help me.
What can we do for each other in this situation?
To some degree, but maybe there is not, but you kind of have to find some common ground.
Interesting.
Otherwise, this is not going to end.
And one of the reasons why I think that especially we need to build global communities with remote viewing is we have vastly different spiritual and religious views across the world. I can definitely see, especially with the tradition of brujas and things like that in Brazil, that and psychics and things like that, that remote viewing would be pretty well open arms accepted in the communities of Brazil, in the psychic communities of Brazil, things like that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think that this is when the adaptation of the terminology and language kind of helps, because in fact, we built a glossary of terms, for RV.
Oh, great!
Put all of the key terms there, and then maybe how do they translate in other languages, and this helps us to kind of maintain a style and communication.
That's right.
The world, and all that's important. But the point you're making is that perhaps we just had a meeting recently about other countries, they might welcome the word intuition. And when you say remote viewing, they might associate that with, it's a paramilitary technique for extracting data out of investigation, like opportunities and all that. So maybe in Latin America, they would be a little bit more inclined to the curiosity element will come to intuition. And then, there's sometimes when you can bring in the consciousness and unconsciousness aspect of it. And then perhaps, it's your inherent spirituality manifesting, through, your awareness.
Because especially in Latin America, the understanding that these kind of things run in familial lines, that your grandmother saw stuff, your aunt saw stuff, it might be likely you will. That kind of understanding is very common, whereas opposed to in the States, it's kind of looked upon as like, what's wrong with you? Latin America, Europe, Eastern Europe especially.
That's right.
And Spain, things like that. Quite different. Very, very open arms expected, and it's not uncommon for politicians to have somebody who works with them. Like when Ronald Reagan or Nancy Reagan rather, was found out to be using the astronomer or the astrologer, it was like, oh my God, is the president using astrology to make his decisions? It's like, in other countries, that would have been perfectly accepted and like, oh yeah, of course they have somebody that does that. Like we have somebody in the family that does that too.
There's a different level of openness to that. So maybe, speaking of Brazil or some elements in Latin America, you have also the concept of a shaman.
Mm-hmm.
So the native, have brought this awareness of that. In Brazil, there has been many cases of psychic healers. There's the doctor with the rusty knife. But then also other people exploring, how crystals work and how healing. There's what I've seen in Brazil. It's a lot of healing related things. But do presidents consult with psychics?
Oh yeah,
or work with remote viewers too. So it's all there, and people are maybe a little more open, I would say, to the spirituality side. It kind of runs through the spirituality.
Well, exactly. And being able to share that perspective, being able to have a global perspective on that is hugely important as we move this topic forward in the digital age.
Yeah, and then we were talking about, how do we bring this to the next generation? It's very important to have like the right blocks in line that are speaking to a person, like they're touching them on a personal level.
Yeah.
Because we all make decisions every day, and we make decisions based on information that we gather. And if we can just take a little bit, one more step, and realize that there is a lot of interpretation that the brain goes through to make a decision. And if you can be curious about why you're doing that, that's a great opportunity.
As I mentioned in the end of my talk, even generationally, the way that we learn, the generational gap of learning and how we process information is totally different.
Yeah.
The way a 20-year-old approaches this topic is totally different than me as a 50-year-old.
That's right.
The way that they find out information and look for information on the internet, the way that they interact with the digital device is 180 degrees different than me.
And to that effect, they can do things a lot faster.
Yes, they can.
Their ability to spread information, collect, and then build consensus on the next step, it's incredible.
Yeah. Could you imagine a remote viewing flash mob?
Yeah, exactly. They can do that. And the other thing is that they can do that for fun.
Yeah.
They have the energy, and definitely.
Well, and that's just it. With globalization in mind, we've got it here for about another 5 minutes. Let's spend the last few minutes on how can we begin that step of global digitalization? How can we begin that step of building that global network in that way?
Yeah,
Luciano?
So, the idea, we're at the very early stages right now. So the goal at IRVA right now is to to have like a solid foundation that allows us to work with community leaders. So we have about 7 community leaders right now. And I'm thinking that, what would it take for us to go to 20 by the end of 2025? It's very much possible. So we're kind of building onboarding packages that make sure that everybody has the same information when they become a leader. And we're also giving them the tools that allow them to communicate locally, but in unison. So let's just give an example, AI. There is the opportunity now for us to kind of work with AI to create the same message in multiple languages and then push it through social media channels at the same time. So everything has to be scalable. So scalability is quite important. And then the other one is to collect feedback and engage with the community. But to engage with 20 communities at once is difficult. So that's kind of why we kind of have this infrastructure in country. And the goal is to sort of build the same experience and the same opportunities for teaching and learning. And then I think that IRVA has a professional membership right now.
That's right.
So we may be looking at the next level, because there's 2 sides to this coin. You have a group of people who have a very good sense of identity in each of these countries and regions. And they want to engage and participate. But maybe just taking classes is not enough. You need to work on operational projects.
That's right.
And so I think part of the key here is to create engaging, interesting opportunities for the next generation to play with, so they can learn and they can also apply it. So what are some of the potential projects that a 20-year-old would want to work on that they feel that is meaningful and bringing value to them and their community? So these are the key points that we want to make sure that we have the learning side, and you can be professional and you can impact the world.
Yeah, and the belonging side. The fact that like you are now part of a community, you're now part of a greater mission with this.
Yeah. So that inclusivity is very important.
Yeah.
So we had a meeting recently about what do we need to do to make sure that we are expanding awareness to these communities and welcoming everybody. So maybe like we spoke about Latin America, there's a huge interest on UFO. It's very big, so you can fill up a room with 1,000 people very quickly. But our thing is not only that, right? So you have to make sure you have all flavors on the table, but allow the stronger ones to.
And at the same time, it's enabling people to know the pathway to that community as well. And a prime example would be one of the people I spoke with at MUFON last year in Ohio was Thiago Tiechi, who is the sole MUFON investigator for Brazil.
Okay.
One. There's one MUFON investigator.
Wow. Okay.
So when we're talking about research happening in a vacuum, like I was talking about at the end of my talk, where does he get his help? Locally, culturally, to look at things from a cultural point of view from that lens. He can send it to an American all day long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love that. But the fact that there is one guy in Brazil, one of the countries with the most UFO sightings in the world, and there's one guy.
Yeah.
That's a hard pack to put on, and that's a lot of onus to put on one person. So how do you enable other people who are interested in UFOs to find out about MUFON in Brazil? And how do we get other remote viewers? How do you even connect with other remote viewers in your local community? Like building those networks is what we need to start doing.
Totally. Yeah. So, in the recent past, we've done one meeting in Latin America where we brought in a live interpreter and invited luminaires, people who know a lot about remote viewing, some of the founders, and they spoke in English and the interpreter translated in real time to Spanish and Portuguese. So we had about 344 people sign up for that event. That was good. So I think, one of my goals is to bring 1,000 people into an online event. And then have the live interpreters, and then also inject the automatic captions translation, so that anyone, maybe not just from Latin America, maybe someone in Italy or someone in Spain or France, they want to hear out, and they can read the captions, so we don't need to have interpretation across all languages.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
And once again, finding those cognate words that translate from language to language without losing their meaning, that we can use as protocol.
Yes, the terminology and the stuff gets injected into
because
machine learning.
Yeah, the word that we use here may not have the same nuance in Germany, and definitely won't have the same nuance in Brazil.
Yes.
So we've got to find those universal terms and things like that. It's hugely important.
It is quite important. Yeah, it's for the brand, the trust, and just putting everyone on the same page. But I think you touched on this. Is social networking is very important. Having engaging events. So bringing people together, you got to have this. And then the other one is to generate content. Content has to be created and generated initially through IRVA. Whatever we can do, we can create content in Portuguese or Spanish, French, German, or Norwegian. And then eventually we're going to have a critical point where there's enough engagement in country where they start to generate content themselves.
That's right.
And that's when the magic happens, is when they wear the the shirt, and they're actively engaging in creating new content and new
things are locally searchable at that point, and
then
things like that.
And you can grow very fast. So this is the other aspect of globalization, which is it could explode and blow up on your face. So you could have many regions growing on a scalable level that you can no longer
support all of them.
Yeah. So this idea of segmenting the communication line and then distributing it through the network is quite important, because all types of things will come in, which is wonderful, because variety creates. I think the universe is all about creativity.
That's right.
So we need that variety. We need to include everybody, because that's That's part of our survival.
Yeah, we're genetically diverse for a reason.
That's part of our survival. Yeah. So we need to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It has been fantastic talking with you over the last couple of days, Luciano. It's been a fantastic conversation. Let everybody know where they can go to get in touch with you for training, where they can go to get in touch with you in Brazil or anywhere across the globe for sessions. If they want to come to you and have a Brazilian view of a remote viewing session, let them know.
Yeah. So the easiest way is to go to our website. So IRVA.org is the website, and then there's an option on the main menu for community of special interest, and that's my page. That's kind of my space in the IRVA organization. And we're building. We're just kind of starting to update the site now, where we're going to put a page for every leader in their own language with an introduction, a video, and also all of the email contacts. So I can be reached out at Arruda@irva.org, but also through the website.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Luciano. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to another couple days at sea with you and to much more conversation.
Likewise.
While you are online checking out everything from the International Remote Viewing Association at IRVA.org, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find all of our videos from amazing guests like Luciano. Make sure to stop on by there and follow us, everybody. When we come back from this break, we will continue with our waning coverage of the International Remote Viewing Association 25th Anniversary Cruise here on the Mariner of the Seas, right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.